IVM.
Hello and welcome to episode 123 of the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. This is DJ and this is a very, very special episode for us. The West Indies have been playing England, so live cricket's been back, but there hasn't been any Indian cricket, an Indian cricket podcast, right? So the huge news for us is that the Indian Premier League is back on. It starts on the 19th of September. It's going to be on for 51 days and it's going to be in the UAE. So guys, we're super excited. We've relaunched our listener campaign. It's back on too. So make sure you send a voice note at contact@onetiponehand.com telling us about yourself and why you support your team. Make sure you send that by the 1st of August, right? Now, the IPL is a special time of year for a lot of us. And the IPL is synonymous with one man and one voice. And that's Danny Morrison. If you guys have been following us on social media, you know we had a 1 hour long conversation with him talking about all sorts of stuff. We talked about his commentary career. We talked about the various leagues that he covers. We talked about him getting Sachin Tendulkar out in the 1980s and having a full head of hair, of course. We also put in some listener questions, so guys, watch out for those. Really cool. Varun leads the chat. We're all fans of Danny, but Varun is a super fan. I mean, once the IPL starts, Varun basically turns into a mini Danny. Now, I don't know what that means for his friends in Singapore and whether they actually are okay with their friend being taken over by Danny, but it's pretty funny, actually. Ashwin woke up at 2 a.m. to record with us. It was insane. I think his main driving factor was, and the determining factor was, he'd once woken up at 4 a.m. to record a regular podcast with me, so he just felt that he wouldn't be able to forgive himself if he didn't wake up to record with Danny. Both of us clearly failed in our mission to prevent Varun from talking to Danny like Danny. And you will see that right at the start of the podcast. But in all seriousness, guys, it was a great chat. Danny really indulged us. He brought out the double Ds, the double Rs, and doing all of that while helping his wife cook dinner. So clearly a guy with many talents. So guys, buckle in and enjoy the ride. It's just fantastic.
Welcome to a very, very, very special episode of Edges and Sledges this week. Our guest is synonymous with the IPL this week. For all our listeners out there, when we've done interviews before, you know, typically DJ Ashwin and myself, Varun, all three of us don't get on. It's 2 a.m. for Ashwin. It's 8 a.m. for DJ. It's 3 in the afternoon for me. And I have to be honest, I have a big presentation tomorrow for which I haven't done much work today because I've been so excited. Guys, we got to welcome Danny Morrison on the Edges and Sledges podcast. Danny, thank you for joining us.
Geez, that's not good, is it? You haven't done any prep work, brother. What's happening? Oh, no.
I wanted to shout, Vanakam, Danny.
Oh, Vanakam. No double Ds, but there's still the double Rs, and we love them to pieces.
That just made our day here, Danny. Danny, we're going to do it a little bit differently. We always start about your journey as a cricketer, but the three of us are just IPL addicts. We're going to start with T20 cricket. Before we start talking, I just want to ask you, how are you doing, Danny? What's been happening during COVID-19 for you?
Very spoiled in this part of the world in terms of, because I live just north of Brisbane for your podcast viewers. In New Zealand, of course, it's been locked down even more, but of course they've got it under control. And the very fortunate thing about our geography is that we don't have borders. You know, that's it. New Zealand, 3 little islands. Australia, one big rock, as I like to tell those Aussies. They crawled under a rock, those mongrel Aussies. We love them. They're very spoiled in this part of the world because, as you say, because of the big landmass, but like India and the subcontinent, you get good weather, right? You get a lot of rain too and what have you, but generally when it's supposed to be nice, it can be nice weather. And we're tucked away down here. Melbourne and Victoria, where that wonderful human being Dean Jones comes from. Geez, we love giving Dean Jones stick, don't we? And he's down there, and they're having another lockdown. They're having a real drama, sadly, very frustratingly. And then, I don't know, you've got lots of states in India. It's massive. And then you've got the United States, right? So then, you guys are in such bigger population bases, and it's not about, those stupid Victorians there. We're all right, Jack, up here. Well, it actually affects the whole country. Economically, the bubble, trying to move forward with this crazy COVID-19, the landscape of the planet as we appreciate has changed. So there's no point just going, those stupid Victorians. As Queenslanders, here in the state of Queensland, the Gabba, all that for podcast cricket fans, they love Queenslanders. They love calling anyone like from New South Wales or Victoria Mexicans south of the border. Isn't that naughty? In this PC environment, you'd be very careful what you say. So they call them Mexicans. And of course, Mexicans pile in. That's the cheek of it because, of course, we know a lot of Mexicans like going in to annoy Donald Trump in the United States. And we love that. And I'm an immigrant too. So, I've piled in here by choice to annoy all the Aussies from New Zealand. But we're very fortunate. This is just so much easier containment and compared to, don't have to tell you chaps. The United States, Europe, China, Russia, the subcontinent, Asia, there's just so many people. So you're going to get more chance to get contagious viruses like this one to just spread and go nuts. So, yeah, I've got to say, gents, very spoiled in this part of the world.
Yeah, lucky, Danny. We're very envious of you. And tell us, for our listeners out there, we're on a Zoom call with Danny and we can see him wearing a St. Lucia cap.
And Danny, yes, the cap. Well, I didn't want to scare everyone. Look, I've just shaven today. Uncle Fester out of the Addams family. But I've got this one. Yeah, I remember buying this with a Kiwi cameraman mate of mine who's just enlightened me. He's not coming to the Caribbean now. He's going to stay down under, even though he lives in Texas with his lady. She's an American. And I'm like, what is it with you? Come on. Come to the CPL. We're going to the CPL. They're opening things up. Isn't this exciting? He goes, no. So he was the one Hamish Roberts talked me into buying this cap.
How excited are you to see live cricket start again, Danny? And how excited are you to get back in the commentary box?
Oh, very much so. Look, I've also got to say, again, just different situations for folks. It's been immensely tough for a lot of people. So that's why I've mentioned that. It has been a lot easier down under and sort of, in this. And there's a lot of people in Australia and New Zealand who suffer. Businesses shut down. And I know it's on a bigger, grander scale in heavily populated parts of the world, i.e. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all of that, Europe, whatever. But for me, it's just been lovely because, as you appreciate, viewers will understand, I spend quite a bit of time on the treadmill of T20 cricket. Very grateful, love what I do. But this has been great. This is the longest I've been at home in a stretch, like 4 months on the trot. I've been home. I had to come home from the PSL. I met my daughter up in Dubai on the way down. She came down from Germany doing a dance gig, a cabaret show. And so then I had to meet her, and we got home on March the 20th. And we've been home ever since. In a semi-lockdown scenario, doing lots of podcasts, lots of Zoom chats, lots of stuff, as you can appreciate, with the subcontinent. But I have to say it's been great catching up with just the inner sanctum of family here. We've moved house, so we've had to move to another little house. We couldn't have done that in New Zealand. We couldn't have done that around late April just because they had stage 4. But that's again showing you the nature of it here in southeast Queensland. Just again, very blessed.
Awesome. And Danny, I have to say, and we've done 120 episodes, and I think all the listeners know that I actually watch cricket on mute, except when there's one person in the commentary box, and that is you. It is always on when you are speaking. You make up, I think, pretty much 50% of the IPL for me, at least.
You're the only one. So at least I've got one fan.
I'm copying your voice from day one, but I have to ask, even I get tired of that kind of energy by week 3 of the IPL. How do you keep it going for 6 weeks and 12 years? How do you keep that kind of energy going?
Well, I tell you what, herein lies the challenge because I think at the end of the PSL, I think I did 3 or 4 games where there was no crowd. So we were behind closed doors. And, of course, then the whole level of stuff just has to come down because you haven't got the crowd to rev you up or drown you out. And that's how, in a way, I developed and got a little bit more animated and full on simply because of IPL and the crowds. Really, when you think about that, or the Bangladesh Premier League, all of that scenario, and the Caribbean Premier League came along in 2013. So you had to be animated, and you watch. Well, you listen. Maybe not quite as high octane and as energized as me, but see people like Simon Doull. He's had to get quite louder. Ian Bishop lifts another few octaves. You just do, simply because of the amount of crowd, and particularly IPL, because there's just so much noise, and they're full houses, and the sound reverberates around the stadia. So you do get up, and I love it. And then you ask me, well, in a way, there's no excuse not to be up and energized. You're on for 5 overs, You're on for 5 overs. Sometimes in different leagues it doubles up and you might do 10, which is quite long for T20. 10 on the trot's a lot. So normally it's that 4 or 5, bang, 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 bang. And, the game's fast and furious. So in a way, there's no excuse not to be up and excited, and it's a given. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. You have the IPL, full houses, Pakistan Super League, Caribbean Premier League, Bangladesh Premier League, which I do, I've done in the past. That does lift you because the crowd is such a key element. It's going to be very different. It's going to be fascinating to see. And this is data, what are we now? Middle of July. In terms of being told that the IPL may go to the UAE, going to be interesting whether they're allowed, 20%, 30% capacity in the crowd. Are they going to allow that? They're going to say, look, yeah, we can have 25% of the stadium with live fans coming to the venue. I don't know. It'll be fascinating to see it in Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Sharjah. I hope it does. I really hope it can, because they've got that window now, haven't they? The ICC World T20 shifted by a year, postpone it. It's a no-brainer to me.
And so, Danny, what are your thoughts on the postponement of the World T20? I mean, there are a lot of talks around how, stadium without people wouldn't be as much fun, but for the viewers, they're still craving cricket. For us, of course, IPL or World T20, it means cricket is on. So we're very happy if either one goes on. But any thoughts about the World T20 getting postponed and IPL coming back?
Well, I just think logistically that's the challenge. And Australia's big. And, of course, now Melbourne's having those issues of another spike. And so they've gone into another 6-week lockdown. So I suppose the challenge there, guys, is that you're having, was it 14 teams? 14? Because you're the associate, I think it's 16. So you've got 16 teams trying to be involved in a tournament. And the quarantine hassles, the logistics of maybe having a hub in two cities, I just think it's just too soon. And I think also the Australian government will be saying, look, we've contained it to a certain degree, but now with the spike in Melbourne, it's just shown that no one's immune. Of course, we all know that. But, the spiking and the unnecessary risk factor, I think they've got to be sensible. So, look, to me, again, it's another one of those obvious things. Got to postpone it. You can postpone it. And in 2020, it's such a shame. But, that's the scenario. That's what you've got to do. Whereas the next question I'm going to answer for you, or before you answer, in the UAE, you've got, 5 million people in the UAE, in the Emirates. And it's a new city. When you look at it, it's not even 20 years old, really. It's a lot in the desert. There's a lot of high-rise. Yes, there's a lot more people in the last 5, 6, 7 years, having gone there regularly in the UAE and done a lot of work there in the last decade. You can see how much it's got busier. But at the same time, that stadium, particularly the one in Dubai, we know it's expensive, in terms of for those that want to go, and it's not easy. There's not the train doesn't run past that, which is a shame, logistically wise. That they might sort that out later. But all of those sort of things you can control, and they've got a lot of hotels, and those that have wanted to go back home, because as we know, a lot of expats come to Dubai to work. So what I'm saying here is that those that have gone home obviously can't come back. So now I'm just surmising, I'd love to know the facts of how many have had to leave, left contracts, i.e. cabin crew of Emirates, all that, and all the other contracts that have stopped and people said, look, need to go home. Or those that have stayed and gone into their own lockdown in Dubai. But getting back to the point of IPL, I think you've got a great controlled environment where they can do that in a couple of they could have hotel hubs and say, this is where the franchises are staying. This is where perhaps the TV people are staying, all the production and that. You're staying there. That's it. And you organise a hotel, and there are plenty of them, promise you. They're good hotels. We've got good room, amount of size of your room, and then to have that almost shut down and say, let's take over those. And just quietly, you dear Indians, there's a few of you that have got a lot of money and obviously own apartments. Those from the subcontinent with money can be probably there. I'm assuming, and we're never supposed to assume, of course, but I reckon there'd be a few there just quietly that have gone there and would love to then say, bring it. And whether you're a Pakistani, a Bangladeshi, an Indian or a Sri Lankan, the brotherhood that make up the subcontinent, and you could go and you're there and you were allowed to, let's say it's 25%. Of course, you should be wanting to go, shouldn't you? If you're a true cricket lover, you want to go and see live sport event, regardless of being cricket. you should want to go because there's been such a shutdown. And I'll add to this madness, it's summer there now. It's hot. It's 50 degrees. They're talking, aren't they? Very late September. Let's call it October, early November. It's going to be cooling down. You want to get outside. Hopefully, because of the heat, and they're enclosed because of the temperatures, stay indoors, get out of the heat anyway, work from home, and that'll hopefully give more clearance, in particularly Dubai, Sharjah and Abu Dhabi, where the stadiums are, to then hopefully get on top of COVID for IPL to be, quite a happening thing. It could be really quite an exciting thing to say for those cricket lovers back in India and the subcontinent. I'm talking all of the subcontinent. Here's some live cricket again, just to lift your spirits and smile again and have some sort of entertainment to take your mind off all the drama and sadness that's going on.
Absolutely. And I think we're all waiting for that announcement because the only thing we've heard is World T20 has been cancelled. We know Asia Cup has been cancelled. So everything is kind of lining up for the IPL to be announced. So Danny, hope you're right. And the three of us actually had tickets to Australia for the World T20. We can figure out how to get to UAE instead.
Well, I think, you're right. And those obvious postponements, they'll look after you guys and say, look, if you've bought tickets, those that have bought tickets for 2020, they'll stay in void for the next one.
Absolutely. So, Danny, we're going to ask you a few questions where you're going to have to just give us your favorites, right? So, One is, out of all the T20 leagues that you commentate for, which is your favorite league? And you may not have much of a choice because you've got 3 Indians on this.
Well, I often ask that. And of course, India is the biggest extravaganza. It really is. And it's just, the most hype. Of course, it's the noisiest and it's been going since 2008. So really, you could argue it is. It's the longest. That World T20 when India beat Pakistan in Johannesburg was 2007. And then, of course, there's that naughty ICL. And you can't blame them trying to do that. But It wasn't sanctioned. IPL, hello, of course it's going to happen. So, I loved it. Of course we do. I think if you ask, all the other overseas commentators that come and have come for a long time, whether it's some more recent guys playing who've just finished like Kevin Peterson or Graham Swan or Scotty Styris, all those guys, I love coming to it because it's just really the masses of cricket that have such a thirst like, really no other because you share numbers. And, of course, the economy, it's massive. As much as this is hurting with COVID-19, you think of the numbers there of the franchises and the support base and now your hotels. The airports have been done up to get around India. Is a lot more cleaner and safer and simpler, really, for a lot of us. And, God, I laughed there. I said, like Hyderabad airport done up. Finally, Kolkata, I think was one of the last big ones being done. But you're just going to, boys, extend it some more. Let's get some more gates. Because, more planes, we had some dramas with airlines come and go, sure. But, you're just going to need more. You're just going to need more. The masses, people, it's just, that love to get about now, and you can. So, India's right up there. Of course it is. The Caribbean League, which I'm about to go to the end of this month, is not going to be the same. Of course it's not. But when it is in normal full swing, it's very unique. Because, again, it's a bit like Bollywood meets cricket in India, and you've got the music. You've got the music and the holiday sort of party destination comes together with the cricket there. And they've got great history there too in the West Indies, and they love it. And I think because those two, for me, there's such a uniqueness there, are fascinating. Pakistan have only just got their act together with one. It's not that old, is it? PSL 5. And most of them were played in the UAE. So I was just there recently and had to leave because of COVID. And being in Multan was just extraordinary too. That stadium is just it was just a wonderful enclosed stadium, very intimate, and the noise and that atmosphere, again, typical subcontinent. Could have been like in Chittagong, place going crazy, or Dhaka, or in Colombo when it's a full house at Premadasa. You just get great atmosphere for real cricket-loving nations.
Awesome. That's really cool. Thanks, Danny, for that.
It's interesting, that Danny mentioned Multan, because for Varun, who's been asking you the question so far, he is his probably all-time favorite cricketer is also called the Multan ka Sultan. And of course, I'm talking about Virender Sehwag, who made his triple.
Oh, he smashed it. Yeah.
He made his, I think it was India's first ever triple centurion. So anyway, it's funny that you were just there and we're talking.
I can see that on that pitch. What a belter. Yeah. Poor bowlers.
So, Danny, when we talk about IPL, do you have any favorite grounds or any favorite cities that you visited?
I think Mumbai because, and I have a lot of fun there, and sometimes when I've done the toss there in the past, you introduce it with Bollywood and you slip in a couple of Indian little quotes and be cheeky. So I like that.
Do you remember any Indian quotes?
I can't. Well, my favourite, and being a bit naughty, of course, when you get to Chennai, you can go Vanakkam. Terrible. And easy to remember this COVID time when I've lost my mind. They go, what do you mean you've lost your mind? You never had one. So in terms of turning up to the major cities, of course, I mean, they are. And then again, and I think of Vizag, down on the coast there. Again, that was such a small stadium and very humble, but great with a full house again, full on. You're staying right on the coast in Vizag. And again, just the atmosphere, because it's always going to be chocker. Really enjoyed there. Dharamshala, Dalai Lama country. Met him in 2010 and I had the wife in tow. So Kim came up there with me to that and was there, and we got to meet the Dalai. Tommy and Bunga and I snuck out and had a great laugh and got, he put the staff around our neck and it was just lovely and just so picturesque. So I think a lot of different grounds. In terms of having a favourite, it's a bit hard to say really, because, each one has its own sort of character. And even down in Kochi, noisy down there in Kerala, that sort of state. And that was when the Tuskers were there, 2011. They only sort of had one season, didn't they? Now, they're just as an aside, they're talking about having 10 again, haven't they? It's just such a big business. Going from 8 back to 10, they'd like to do that. So I'll be fascinated to see if that does happen as well.
And Danny, we have to ask you, when the three of us are fans of the Delhi team. And
the Double Ds!
The Double Ds. And Danny,
the DCs.
How upset were you when the name changed? Because the first thing the three of us said is, we're not going to be able to hear Danny say Double Ds anymore. But how upset were you?
And I trademarked it as well. I owned it. The Double Ds were mine. I I know people said, Danny, why don't you trademark that? That's you. It rolls. When you're yelling and it's full on and you're trying to get to a point quickly, because there's three of us commentators on, and often sometimes I'll get quite hyped if I'm on leading. Boom. You've got to get in and get out. But the Double Ds or the Double Rs, and here's Butler going berserk again here. So when you're into that, you get it, because you can't, Rajasthan from Tiger Shore, or the Royals, you call them the Royals, but the Double Rs, and you could get, really, and people understand it, and they will, is that you can get more in because you haven't got much time in T20. So you've got to so it was the Double Rs, you could get that, or the Double Ds there, you could get that right in there and just carry on. Or the MIs, it was Mumbai Indians, or CSK, the Kings, Chennai, you're trying to shorten everything. And us Kiwis or Aussies tend to do that a lot. Yep. We tend to shorten everything to get it in. But, yeah, real shame. Loved the Double Ds. It just rolled, didn't it?
DJ was asking us before, how upset do you think Danny was when Double Gs left the Double Ds, right?
I know. Look what I did to myself. I shaved my head when that all changed.
No, but that's good. But Danny, tell us two more questions about the IPL, right? One is, how is it in the commentary box? And do you have any favorite people to commentate alongside? Any fun stories to share for our listeners?
No, not really like sort of favourites. And again, because we chop and change and move around, and you've got everyone, like now, because we got so busy, and we used to have a little bit more of our pockets with you. You'd be in more of a region, like you might be down in Chennai, Bangalore, and nip over to Kolkata and come down to that sort of triangle there, or when Kochi was around, could have been Chennai, Kochi, and Bengaluru, could have been there, or you could have been over in the west. You could have been over at Mumbai and Pune for a bit, or Mumbai up to Rajasthan, and zap back and do all that sort of thing, and then over in Kolkata in the east a bit more, go up to Ranchi, Ranchi, Kolkata, you know what I mean, and move and zip and stay in that pocket. I remember Simon Dooley did a lot of up north. He quite liked that in terms of doing Chandigarh, Delhi, and I think Rajasthan, that sort of triangle. But now, and then of course, now that it's all changed, and the last couple of years it's gone to Star, and they've got a massive studio with a lot of the current ex-guys, more current players that have just finished. So there's a whole extravaganza of that. So we fly more. So you work with everyone. I'm probably missing in a way Ravi Shastri, the big booming Ravi, because he's coached now. He hasn't been in the Combox for probably 5 years now, has he? because he's taken over that role. And of course, him and Virat Kohli get on, and that works. And it's always that sort of thing where a coach and a captain really do get on well. That recipe is so crucial. It's a bit like, I suppose, Stephen Fleming with MS Dhoni, There with Mahi, and you can see there's a great respect, there's a great relationship, and it's built over a long time, clearly. So I think with Ravi and Virat, you can see it, can't you? So, I miss probably Rav, just because, we'd also, I'll throw an off the cuff here. We're a bit spoiled. We go around to his apartment there at the back of the Taj where he lives out, down in Mumbai in Colaba. And we could go and have a few quiet red wines and a cigar and just relax, and there'd be maybe about 8 of us get invited there and go round. Whoever's commentating at that time there, and loved it. That side of it where you get out of a hotel and you get to meet and see other people that are away from cricket. I have that with a family in Chennai. That's where I met through Dennis Lilly when his MRF, his academy was on, when he was doing it and fronting that. And there's some other guys I know who own restaurants in Mumbai. And I get out and I go and catch up with them. I had my mother at IPL 2013, so I took my dear mother when she could still travel and spoiled her, and we stayed lovely at the Taj in downtown Colaba. And then, the Mahesh Seafood Chain, give them a plug. The gang with the Mahesh Seafood Chain that we get to know in Mumbai, go and have a lunch or a dinner, and took mum to one of those in downtown Mumbai. Just lovely, just great. And I think that, for me, that essence of getting away from cricket, because people outside of the game. So it's not all about trains, planes, automobiles, getting from airports to stadiums, living and breathing all the time. That you get to see other parts of it and catch up with people that that are outside the game.
Awesome. And so just before the break, Danny, we're going to ask you about 2 Delhi Capitals players and just get your opinion on them. The first is, of course, Rishabh Pant. Any thoughts on Rishabh Pant?
Oh, very exciting. And no surprises. You've got someone that, plays a bit like an Adam Gilchrist, and everyone keeps going on about that. He's a left-hander and he keeps and all of that. But, I think you're going to keep producing that. Everyone goes on about the big 3, India, England, Australia. Hard to stop that. You really want to try and keep challenging it. Sometimes New Zealand will do that in a one-day series, or, we do well in World Cups, New Zealand. South Africa, when they get a mould together, you try and break that up a bit. West Indies, can they unearth some other Viv Richards type players? Because really the dominance, as you can see, is the big 3, and that's obvious. And Rishabh Pant, fast hands, and just exciting, isn't he?
Awesome. And what about Shreyas Iyer, India's new number 4?
Yeah, well, I saw him at the under-19s. When you get to see these guys come through the whole conveyor belt of the under-19 World Cup scenario, love it to pieces. You really get to see these prodigies. Just, and mine's gone blank because it's been a while and I haven't done any research lately. Who was it? Prithvi, sure. Prithvi, there you go, Prithvi. Now, Prithvi, look at him. He was just, hello. Isn't that Sachin Tendulkar coming out? That looks like, is it Sachin reincarnated? And so it's no surprises when guys model themselves, and they look so elegant. And there's been a couple of guys that look like Azharuddin, and Vrinder Sehwag, they're going to influence the next generation. So, no surprises with those guys. When India are at under-19 World Cups, they tend to always be in the finals or not winning. You know what I mean? They're just so much more mature at that age than a lot of other Western countries, massively.
Awesome. So thank you, Danny, for that. Guys, we're going to take a break and we'll be back after that to learn a little bit more about Danny's career.
I know, I need to check the dinner quickly.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. So, a great week of shows behind us, and hope that you've been catching up on as much of it as you can. We had Abhishek Bachchan on Football Shitball. Yeah, let me say that again. Abhishek Bachchan was on Football Shitball. Did I mention Abhishek Bachchan was on Football Shitball? That was a fun episode. You should definitely check that out. Really, really deep conversation about cricket and things like that. We had Vikram Kochar on Cyrus Says, talking about the platforms and stuff like what's going on over there. On the note, Maruk had spoken to Sanjay Jha, which was, again, a really, really interesting conversation. On Edges and Sledges, the guys are having an interesting conversation about, well, what are favorite formats of cricket and things like that. So it's just really been a really, really awesome week on the network, and please do check things out. And with that, let's get you back to your show.
So welcome back from the break. We're still talking to Danny Morrison. And Danny, we had to ask you before we got into your cricket career a little bit. Tell us about how's the time in the commentary box? Any bloopers come to mind? Any fun moments?
In IPL?
In IPL or any time, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm just probably something like Lisa Stalaker. It's interesting now the whole dynamic in women, which is great. You got to embrace that. I mean, the men and the women's game, there's that whole cross pollination of commentary, and I think it just adds to the colour of it all totally. And I remember we were eating some food. Of course, me troughing on there. Do love a mutton biryani. Or a chicken biryani. Well, and a chicken curry, the whole lot. I love Indian cuisine. And so I remember spilling a bit. And she was eating and scoffing. Of course, you've got to take a little meal when you can. So, you nip out between, and the food's often beautifully laid out. And we get our own little food set up often to a little buffet. Or, you're spoiled in India. You can have, guys running around. No, I'll get it myself. It's okay. No, I'm pleased to do it, please. I'll do a whole sort of. Anyway, she got someone in a waistcoat. We wear those little Nehru-type jackets. Yeah, and waistcoats. And so, and then, of course, she spilt some down her front a little bit, right? And I had a tissue and I went and wiped it and it was there. Maybe I shouldn't do that. She's cracked up and gone, help yourself, Danny. Really? Oh, okay, I won't. So there's my cheeky little blooper story there. But we'll get on. I mean, we're like brother and sister. Get on. Good fun.
So, Danny, now tell us a little bit about your cricket journey, right? I'm sure our listeners want to know, firstly, how did you start playing cricket? Because as we were reading up a little about you, and of course have followed you, you started your first-class debut in 85-86, and you made your international debut very soon after that. So how did you start cricket, and what was it like to be thrown into the international cricket scene so quickly after debuting in your first class?
Well, I started late because a lot of people appreciate rugby. Rugby in New Zealand dominates. The All Blacks, the winter code of rugby union, and kids aspire to do that a lot. But now there's quite a mixture. So you're talking about, for me, through the mid-70s, 1970s, and then the late 70s. Cricket, for me, came a bit later, and I saw Dennis Lillee and Richard Hadley locking horns in 1977 and thought, wow, isn't that cool? And so you took it up by shifting to a different part of Auckland, moved over to my uncle's place on Auckland's North Shore, and people tended to do a lot of different things. They went surfing, they went sailing. It wasn't all just about rugby and rugby league, and belting each other all the time. So then there was cricket options. People played a little bit of tennis or patter tennis, and there were little golf courses you'd see. And me, obviously being younger, I was sort of, cut off from that until I got my horizons broadened by moving over to where my uncle lived. And so we went there. So, when I look at that and seeing that, that on television early, very early black and white TV, and seeing that, fabulous. So then in terms of making my debut for Auckland, a great opportunity. A few of the guys were touring Australia. That was that wonderful season of 85-86. And Richard Hadley did well and, got that 9 wickets at the Gabba in one innings and 6 in the second innings and was man of the series. New Zealand beat Australia the first time 2-1 in late 85. So 86. And so I get the opportunity there for doing well while those guys were away in the one-day series. And, it was quite a jump. But I loved it. And I think for quick bowlers, you've got to take that opportunity early. You might be a bit different. Some guys mature quicker than others. And, I was very grateful to have people like Gary Troop, big left arm, who played a lot for New Zealand. Martin Snedden, who played in the famous underarm game back in 81. He was involved in that. And he played club cricket alongside me. And so I had some good tutors, young. And then to go on a New Zealand tour, again, like just over a year or so later, that was good because, you suddenly had Richard Hadley into room with the great man. That was a blast. It was quite surreal when I look back on it going, wow. And bomb went off my first tour in Sri Lanka. Bomb went off way down right in town there, the big bus station near the train station and bus shelter and everything there. It was a bit freaky. So that was late March, early April 87. I only played the one test. I was 12th man in that test match. So I didn't debut there. But, that was just another enlightening time of being in the subcontinent. And then, getting into that, that tour of Australia in late 87 to make my debut at the Gabba in Brisbane. Wonderful time to be part of that the end of that Richard Hadley, Ewan Chatfield type era with those guys playing, alongside the Crow brothers and John Bracewell and Ian Smith and Martin Snedden and, Johnny Wright. All of those sort of type players who've been around a lot in those 80s at the beginning of that decade, and Hadley longer, of course, and Ewan Chatfield longer. Just fascinating to be involved with it and truly grateful.
And so Danny, was the 89-90 series, home series against India, was that kind of the turning point for you? Or, I think you took 3 or 5 wickets all 3 5-wicket hauls in 3 matches. You were given the New Zealand Cricket Almanac Player of the Year that series. And I think that was that kind of the big turning point for you?
I had hair then. See, I had a beautiful haircut back then. I think it helped aerodynamically having a mullet. That hair at the back, they used to call it a mullet. And so I had that. Beautiful. So for podcast listeners and viewers, they'll know, that helped me most definitely. On a serious note, I think so, because I played a little bit. That was sort of my sort of third season. Even though we didn't play a huge amount of cricket in New Zealand, we didn't play long test series like the Aussies and English having Ashes, or India up against, Pakistan, those big series, back and forth to each other against your rival there, your neighbours. So, you had to take those opportunities when they came along, and it was just a wonderful time. Yeah, that's right. And Christian Betty was the coach, and it was just great rubbing shoulders and chatting to these guys and saying good morning and how things were. And I really enjoyed that summer. Beginning of the night, it was Richard Hadley's last summer at home. He had a testimonial season on one of the other TV channels, and we all chipped in and played in that, played a one-day series at the end of that summer there, and people like Alan Board and all that played, and Kapil Dev stayed on, and, those sort of big-name guys turned up. It was just a great time to be alive and young. I was, beginning of 90, I just turned 24, and, really was an exciting time.
Danny, can I just ask you a question on that series? Because we asked whether it was a turning point for you. It was certainly a turning point for Indian cricket and world cricket in some ways, because this was a series that Sachin Tendulkar made his debut in as a young 16-year-old, right? What was it like bowling to him? Because you must have got him out a few times. And what were your first thoughts of what went on to become an absolute phenomenon in Indian cricket and world cricket and change the face of things?
Yeah, well, Ken Rutherford captained, I think, one of the President's 11 against, and Sachin clearly played in that as a tour game. And I remember Ken Rutherford discussing that at a team meeting and said, this guy has got a lot of time and looks a very, very special talent. And I suppose back then, look, in a way, it was a bit ridiculous because, he was the sort of guy who could have been in his last year of school. He was turning 17, so he could have been, say, like, you equate that to us growing up and you're playing, your grammar school, your first 11 cricket team. And, here he is playing international test cricket and looked, beautiful getting into line sometimes and leaving Richard Hadley with that beautiful shape and that. Of course, he was always going to, early on, it was going to be intimidating for him. Like all of us was on your first test match, first series. I think he played it was a one test against Pakistan, but this was the actual first full series he was getting, and he was up against Hadley, who's right at the end of his career, but still one hell of a bowler. And when I look at that and remembered, a couple of shots. He got that 88 in Napier, and he was in such a hurry. I think he'd hit me for 3 4s and this one over, and he was almost. You could see he was that impetuous nature of the youth, and he wanted to keep going, and he ended up smashing me to John Wright. How ironic's that? He was going to be
mid-off, right? That's what I remember you for with the big mullet. Getting Sachin caught in mid-off, 88. Missed out on being the youngest centurion ever.
Yes. Well, that was it, and hence saying he was so impetuous because he could have been the youngest ever to get a Test 100. And you could see it took him an age to get off the ground, but he was. You get on like a snowball rolling down the hill, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and just get boom, 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 until it went bust. And he did. He sort of hit the tree on the way down the mountain, which was a shame, I think, for Indian fans. Of course, he was going so beautifully. He got out for 88, but that that's that's the beautiful game. You could be out for second ball, whatever, playing a shot like that. But he was on a roll, and you could see he was a real talent, no doubt about it.
Danny, I'm going to jump in with a quick listener question we got from Karthik O, who did, since you mentioned the 1994 series in particular, right? India versus New Zealand, 4 ODIs. It was ended up tied or drawn at 2-2. The test match ended in a draw. But there's one match in Napier that many Indian fans will remember, and you may or may not remember, but this young lad with a full head of hair came charging in, gets Kapil Dev bowled on a Yorker. Next ball gets Salil Ankola bowled on a Yorker. And then in the first ball of his next over, picks up his 3rd wicket, also off a beautiful Yorker. So talk us through that, right? For Indian fans, Danny Morrison getting a hat-trick against India, including the wicket of Kapil Dev, is pretty incredible. So
the first time New Zealand.
I was going to show you. I've got a lovely thing that, and I'm not really like if you remember in the house, I'm not really a memorabilia guy, but my dear wife organised for me, and it's been in storage, all that sort of stuff and bits and pieces of caps and stuff and some old photos for over 20 odd years. Because I stopped playing at the beginning of 97. So that's a fair while ago now, 23 years ago. And so a couple of these things that I've finally got out of storage, and of course we moved to Australia as well, and they've just been sitting in a stored cabinet of that hat-trick. I've kept the ball. I can't go in there now because Kim, my wife's on a Zoom call doing a mentor call to her tribe. And so, it was amazing. Look, when I look at it, the ball was getting older. And remember they used to change the ball sometimes at 34 overs a little later on because the ball was going a bit greyer and softer. The batsmen didn't like it. They were bitching and moaning. But you could get it to reverse. And the white ball really did reverse quite appreciably more because it got scuffed up and smashed a bit more than, of course, the red ball in Test cricket. And so, that was balls 5 and 6 of 1 over. Kapil, dragged one on. But, I thought, well, it's going nicely in the air. And we've seen a lot of the 2 Ws, Waqar and Wasim, run us over regularly. And we knew what they were up to a little bit, scuffing it, and you think about using a thumbnail. Like for now, I just think it's so sad. That ball's going to turn into like the pink ball is going to turn into a shiny thing where there'll be no real lacquer on it. It'll be fascinating. The state of the cricket ball will change even more and being played. That's another story. But in terms of the old white ball, it started to hoop more. And then you just thought, well, I'll just try and bowl Yorkers. If nothing else, they're not going to try and hit you out of the park. But if you get that right, they're just going to dig you out or squirt you for one or whatever. And then the last one, the Nayan Mongia, he got pushed down the order, so the keeper. And it just turned out, and I realised the crowd got right in behind me and the team. And, of course, and then Ken Rutherford. And on the footage that's on YouTube there, I think Glenn Turner's commentating, that's right, with a guy called Grant Nisbet, who's a famous rugby guy too. And he goes, well, Rutherford's been a bit cheeky here. He's getting a slip-in. I suppose Morrison is on a hat-trick, rah. And it's Glenn Turner. And so then it came in and then boom, and got it right. And it was just like the one to Ankola, just a beautiful length that would just suck in and just at the last split, a la Waqar or Wasim, the ball just a tail like that and dip really late. It was just great conditions. It was also late in the day in the afternoon, so I had those in my favour as well. A couple of shadows were starting to come across, and the ball, it hadn't been changed. So it was just a good sense of timing that the ball could swing like that and swing late, which was just great. It was almost like a magnet at the end, and just to get that length. It's a bit like Trent Bolt, he's done that feat as well. It was quite nice to be on commentary. I was in Abu Dhabi. There was a couple of years ago in late 18, and he did that in a one-dayer. Even then prior to the World Cup, got it again. So you think was it me, Shane Bond, and Trent Bolt who've got hat-tricks in one-day cricket. A lot of guys, lots of guys on a hat-trick, but Bolty, I remember him, the hat-trick he got in Abu Dhabi. Again, full, trying to swing it, knock guys over. I think a couple of I can't remember, they were all LBWs. That'd be interesting to know, but he certainly got them full and swinging.
Awesome. And Danny, given the name of our podcast is Edges and Sledges, were you a bowler who sledged often?
No, I wasn't. I tended to give a wink. If you spoke to a lot of first class guys, I was probably a bit grumpy and, was I a bully more at first class? I just think it's funny. You tended to get a bit more angry in first class cricket because it was more relaxed and you were going to dominate a bit more there. Whereas Test cricket, or when you were so focused on trying to do well and stay ahead of the game or just try and execute what you were there to do. And I just think got on with it. I tended with the Aussies have a smile and a wink and then go, with Michael Slater, and of course doing a lot more work with Slats in the commentary box in recent years, there was one sledge I gave him beautifully was Matthew Hayden was getting a lot of runs for Queensland in state cricket, and Mark Taylor was going through a bit of a lull, but because they'd been doing well in the Ashes of 93, Border's last Ashes series, did well, and Mark Taylor, been around a long time, quality individual, been around for that good 4.5 years, and the guy, Matty Hayden, was just getting a truckload of runs, and there was a banner, I remember, at the ground. The only thing bigger than Mark Taylor's backside is Matthew Hayden's average, right, in first class. So there's this big banner, I'll never forget it, the Wacker, 93. And then Michael Slater had made his debut in that series in the Ashes of 93, got 100 on debut at Lord's, rah-de-rah-de-rah. But he was struggling a little bit too when he came back. He was just, there's that break, and again, from England back to Australia, different conditions, clearly. And they were struggling a little bit, and then, but they still went with them because they were the guys that put this combination together at the Ashes in England, playing New Zealand. First home test of the summer pretty much was there at the Wacker, and we went there. And then I remember beating Michael Slater a few times just outside off stump. He played a couple of flashy drives like Michael can, and then a couple of little player misses. And I remember following through and just give it the old, where is this guy Hayden? I gave it that, and my word, Michael Slater just exploded. He just went effing blinding. You can up, and the whole thing. He just went nuts, went crazy, and I just went. I just winked to him, and then I bowled him, beat him again, and went, oh, it's coming. That sort of stuff. So I had more fun with that rather than being like Big Merv, where he was just Big Merv. Those Aussies. I'm going to rip your head off and feces down your throat and stuff like that. And, just like, and you just be like, is this a movie? What, really? And he was just like this big, bristling menace. And they would go at you a little bit, and just be a bit more questioning your parentage and giving you grief. And it was just typical Aussies, and of course, there's that famous word in India that gets used a lot, that just, you can see the players giving you that, good old Mr. Ben and Co. So all of that. And I just never really was in terms of, as I say, not so much at international level. It was just a bit more cheek and wink and just like, are you kidding me? Really? And that would try and get under the skin of the guys, just put them off a bit, really.
I like Ben and Co. We thought on this show, we thought people were saying Ben Stokes. That's what we thought they're saying. So maybe that's
even Ben Stokes thought they were saying Ben Stokes.
He loves a sledge, doesn't he?
Mm. He's calmed down a little bit though. He's now just smashing runs and taking wickets.
Fiery redhead. And
although I found out somewhere that he's got a hair transplant. It's not all natural. I was listening to a podcast that apparently he's been on a hair transplant website somewhere.
He's not going to be short of a bob or two. He's not worried about his next meal. So he's clearly going to be affording to do that. If he has to pay for it at all, he's probably going to be the next ambassador for it, isn't he? I'll be paying him.
DJ Ashwin, any listener questions you guys want to quickly ask Danny?
Danny, we tweeted out once you came on, and we've got loads of questions. So I don't think we can go through all of them, but we'll try and pick some of the more interesting ones for you. So obviously there's lots of questions about your commentary, what your favorite stint is. We might ask you to close out the episode with your favorite line as a commentator. But I think Nice Gary, who's at the rate of fervid cricketers, asked, who is your most favorite commentator of all time? So did you have a favorite commentator that you like the style of, or someone to work with maybe?
Yeah, I think for a lot of us down under growing up with the great Richie Benaud, in terms of for television, really did enjoy that. And because Channel 9 were fairly slick, and of course, being in New Zealand and growing up and seeing a bit of that once that 1980-81, the famous underarm incident, and Richard Hadley and that great side that they turned into were playing in the World Series for the first time. India were in that series as well. So India and New Zealand shared that summer. It was a great summer of all-rounders. You saw that, and it really was a good summer. So Benno was, he was out there for you, sure. And someone like a Tony Gregg that, Indian fans and subcontinent fans will love. Greggy was a pioneer too, in that he was quite boisterous. He was up and he was loud and he was animated. and he had a very distinctive voice, but he really did engage and embrace white ball cricket. And understandably, he was part of the Packer revolution. He was one of Packer's sort of right-hand men, if you like. But he brought that entertainment and excitement to viewing. And he'd get it wrong from time, and he was quick to admonish himself as well. Admonish himself because he just knew that you can't always be too serious and take yourself super seriously all the time. Otherwise, it gets boring. And so I enjoyed those two.
I saw him up a tree recently, and he went into a tree, didn't he, during a tour of the West Indies. And I mean, that's the sort of thing that we hadn't seen before. So incredible, of course. Tony Greig, just amazing.
Yeah, there'd be some great old footage that people wouldn't have seen of what Greggy getting up to, and and pretending to be shot or something in that Calcutta test in '77 to rev the crowd up, and pretending to be shot and die, or be injured. So he did some crazy stuff because he was a bit of a showman, and he was good fun.
All right, Danny, we want to be respectful of your time. I got one more question that I absolutely love, so I'm going to ask you. And it came from a listener on Twitter named Nandan Bol at NBOAL. One game that he, being Danny, you wished you were a commentator at the dying end, right? So some of the iconic moments in the last few years, Ian Bishop at the 2016 World Cup saying Carlos Brathwaite, remember the name. Shastri in 2011 saying Dhoni finishes it off in style. And of course, more recently, 2019, Ian Smith, right? Agony and absolute ecstasy for England by the barest of all margins. So can you think of a moment you wished you were commentating at?
It's funny because people ask you that because they know that I don't tend to do a lot of ICC events. I'll probably do under-19s and maybe even some of the women's gigs. And that to me, part of that is and that's not, do I go hunting full on for it, or do I get pigeonholed as a T20 specialist? Probably, and I understand that. But I also, I love the variety of them mixing it up for me with a lot of work. Is that ICC events, the men's ones particularly, I'll be in studio either in Delhi or Mumbai, or in the recent past too is in Dubai. And so, you're doing studio-based shows there for that scenario. Plus, and if I'm really honest about it too, you're going to get those bigger name guys really that have been around the scene that tend to do a lot of those, i.e. Nasser Hussain. Greggy used to love doing all of those events like that. Simon Dool and Ian Smith at World Cups, and they've got that Kiwi contingent of that, and you sort of know your niche where that is. But as far as calling something exciting, a couple of times, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to do quite a few of the finals years, a little while ago, of the IPLs, being at the finals. But look, it's not the be-all and end-all for me. I think for me, the excitement is that you can bring that different entertainment factor to a T20 match or a 50-over game, and that people are, right into. And if it's a good game, that goes down to the wire. And I think everyone loves that. You mentioned, Bish being on with, Carlos and that last over against Stokes. I mean, they needed, 19, and man, he smoked it. It was fascinating. And then, I mean, you couldn't have scripted that World Cup final last year, and Ben Stokes being a New Zealander, first and foremost, he was, up until he was 12, and then stayed in England. And I think at that stage last year, sort of half his life, or just most of his life in England, maybe 13 years versus 12, and you laugh and go, Christ, he's a New Zealander that stuffed it up with him sliding the bat, going over the rope, all of that sort of stuff. I mean, and then to have you're going to have a super over in a World Cup final. I mean, at Lord's, you just couldn't have scripted it. And it was England, and it was their fourth final. They'd lost 3 previously. So all of that, you just couldn't have scripted any better. And those finishes, and to have, I think when you look at it overall, true, real doyen professional guys like an Ian Smith doing that, those sort of guys, or a Richie Beno finishing something off there, iconic guys. I mean, John Arlott off the radio in England, loved him, and Brian Johnson. Those guys are on Test Match Special, and yes, lovely Johnson going on. And they had those distinctive voices. And I suppose, and Indian cricket fans, because obviously it'll be in Hindi, it'll have iconic, Indian radio commentators that will stand out for them and be like that. And really it is. It's about those, I think, those real doyens that you loved hearing in those real special moments. Even a David Lloyd, even Bumble. Bumble there and doing other previous World Cups in the past. Really important type big games that were on in England. Finishing games. Was it one with Ganguly swinging his shirt around at Lord's on the balcony? Guys that are on doing that, calling that, and having fun with those very emotive pictures, do that well. And so, I'm totally. What would you said iconic being on? I suppose would you say would have been a World Cup final on there? That possibly. I've been fortunate to do some test matches, a bit more in Abu Dhabi and Dubai and stuff for Pakistan, and I've really enjoyed that. And being grateful to do a bit of that Red Bull stuff. I'd love to. In the Caribbean as well, that's quite a different flavour and feel. So there's probably no one point you say, would you love to have been on at that, real auspicious time. Just got to roll with it.
And Danny, I think while you may or may not get your schedules for the finals part of every game, for us, we would just love to see you open every game. So anytime you're at a stadium, please go out for the coin toss. Please get that energy. We can't wait for the IPL to start, more so because we can't wait to see you on screen again. And I have to say, this has been one of our most special episodes. So thank you very much, Danny.
Well, gents, I've loved it. And I just on that note, because of course it's not too far away, it'll be fascinating what they do with that, because I've even heard some talk, would they have people up there to commentate there, or could you actually do it? Like in the past, you've seen people do it off tube. It'd be a shame if they can't. I mean, that's why you go to Dubai. You need the live atmosphere, and even someone throwing down to some interviews. And I know it's the COVID time, of course, but, I think the importance of having different voices and different characters in the comm box, as you say, adds to it as well. So, yeah, I'm with you. It'd be fascinating to see how that goes. Is it going to be behind closed doors? Is there going to be, say, 25, 30%, of a crowd allowed into the UAE for live games? I really hope so, because it is the biggest T20 franchise tournament on the planet. So yeah, it'd be very much a sad day if there'd be no crowd let in. It's behind closed doors, but we've got to wait and see. And of course, with COVID-19, no one can control it at the moment, it seems.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much, Danny, for taking out the time to join us.
Well done, Jensen. Loved it. Sledges and edges and edges and sledges. Here we go again over extra cover.
And there you have it, guys. Probably one of our greatest episodes ever. It was just such a pleasure speaking to Danny Morrison, such an icon for the IPL and fans of the IPL like us, right? So, as usual, guys, please write in with your thoughts, feedback, comments, ideas for the show at contact@onetiponehand.com. As I mentioned, our listener campaign is back on. We're going to try and get you guys onto the podcast while the IPL is on. So make sure you send those voice notes in. And yeah, we're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at @OneTipOneHand. And that's the number one tip, the number one hand. And yeah, we're on all the big platforms. If you're obviously listening to this, you're listening to it on one of the platforms. So thank you for that. And yeah, leave us a rating. Leave us a review. It helps us grow. Tell your friends about the podcast. As I've always said, the best recommendations come from listeners, right? It's word of mouth that helps the podcast grow. And thank you very much for listening. And we will be back next week with another super interview. So stay tuned for that.
Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta. I'm B50 on Twitter. I am the host of Paisa Paisa, the show that talks money. On my show, I speak to experts from every field of money and finance, from stock markets, equities, debt funds, credit cards, life insurance, every possible area of money and finance that you can think of. We even did an episode on cryptocurrency. I've got fantastic guests from mutual funds to personal finance experts everywhere. Robo-advisory, startups, just name it, we've got it. At Paisa Paisa, we help you make smart decisions about money. You work hard for money. Now make your money work hard for you. New episodes out every Monday, and you can listen to my show on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you have.
रिश्ते में तो हम तुम्हारे पॉडकास्ट लगते हैं. नाम है फुटबॉल शुटबॉल.
Presenting Football Shortball, a show about three friends discussing our favorite game over a beer. Sometimes 3, maybe even 5. Hi, I'm Shiva, and with me are my two sidekicks, Gaurav Sapre and Karthik Iyer.
Sidekick? You mean like Batman's Robin or Van Persie Robin?
No, I mean like Alexis Sanchez, but with a little more skill than just playing the piano.
Ha, just shows how the best players at Arsenal are mere bench warmers at United.
Oh, thank you, Iyer. But you're a Fulham supporter. So whenever you say anything to support me, I question my beliefs.
Just like how Griezmann would say, एक बार मैंने जो decision ले लिया, तो मैं अपने आप की भी नहीं सुनता.
Banter aside, we will talk match reports, transfer rumours, top controversies, fantasy football picks and so much more. So grab a beer and tune in to Football Should Ball every Wednesday on the IVM Podcast app, website or wherever you get your podcasts.